Bluestone makes investment loans simple with competitive interest rates. Borrow up to 85% of the value of your investment property without paying lender's mortgage insurance, and no cap on existing investment portfolio size. Plus, personal Bluestone support from application to settlement. So don't wait to unlock your future. Bluestone, award-winning home loan solutions. Find out more at bluestone.com.au/investors. Lending criteria, T's and C's and fees apply. Credit provided by Permanent Custodians Limited, Australian Credit Licence 390183.
Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show, the podcast by investors for investors.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the SBI Show. Maja here with you today, the editor of SBI. Hope everyone is well. So we talk about this all the time, but house prices are in overdrive at the moment. And while property doesn't guarantee overnight wealth, if you make the right decisions and steer your portfolio correctly, you could be on the path to financial security. So if you're looking for a way to manage your portfolio, keep on top of all those costs and your revenue, I'd recommend Phil's trusty property spreadsheet. So I've seen it and I can tell you that it's a pretty good spreadsheet. So Phil chatted about it on an earlier podcast and we were absolutely swamped by email. So we've decided to make it available via our homepage at smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. Our friends at Atlas Property Group are helping bring this to you. So all you have to do is click the link powered by Atlas Property Group and get stuck into it. So today with us, we have property investor Anna Woolaston. Welcome, Anna, and thanks for agreeing to join us on our show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we're very happy to have you. So, Anna, my understanding is that you're still in the early acquisition phase of your investment portfolio. So you're a 33-year-old nurse who started her property journey at 29 when you were single, and now you're married and you've continued the journey with your husband. So let's start with your solo investments. First of all, how did you sort of decide to follow this path, and how did you go about sort of saving for that first deposit? Because we know it's quite sort of hard for young people, and then especially if you're single, it can be sort of even harder to have that one income for the mortgage. So tell us a little bit about that start.
Well, the first property is actually where we live now. So it's always been a principal place of residence. And I guess I've always been just quite a good saver from a young age. And then when I was younger in nursing, I did like lots of overtime. I did weekend shifts, Saturdays. Obviously, Saturdays and Sundays pay more money than the sort of Monday to Friday. And I guess in some ways that saved money as well because I wasn't going out and spending it. So, I did the inner west lifestyle where I lived in share houses and saved money that way as well by reducing my living costs. And then I had the deposit and I decided it was time to sort of buy my own place and sort of upgrade from that share house lifestyle. I had quite a decent deposit by the time I was ready to buy. I didn't want to overextend myself because, like you said, I was single and it relied on my income loan. So I brought out a bit further. So I brought near Parramatta in a suburb called Harris Park, it shares a postcode with Parramatta. And I brought a 2-bedroom apartment, very close to train stations and shops and everything that I kind of wanted. So,
that sounds pretty amazing. And tell me just, you are a nurse, so obviously, it hasn't been an easy job for you for the past year. And I guess tell us a little bit about that as well, how hard it was to sort of balance everything given COVID and it's a very sort of demanding career to be in during a pandemic, isn't it?
Yeah, it's been pretty exhausting, definitely. So I actually, in February 2019, I was one of the people I was sent to the airport to screen people returning from flights from China. So that was an interesting experience. That was kind of before we really knew how horrible this pandemic would be. So that was an interesting experience, definitely. And then from like March and April, I was also sent to do swabbing for COVID. And so I was kind of in the thick of the pandemic for a little while there. But more recently, my role doesn't involve anything like that. So I guess I'm a little bit separated from it at the moment. But
Well, yeah.
it's really hard. Yeah.
I can imagine. And thank you for your sort of service and everything you've done too, because obviously we've talked about this a lot. We've been a very lucky country in the fact that we've been able to contain this pretty sort of quickly, and thankfully we didn't see too much life loss when compared to the rest of the world. So yeah, thank you. But just getting back to your property journey. So you said your first property was a 2-bedroom apartment in Harris Park, New South Wales. So you bought that in 2017. And now you live there with your husband. And you also mentioned to me before this podcast that you purchased that at a pretty high price. So it has actually declined in value. So tell me a little bit about that experience as well. Did you do that on your own? Or you didn't sort of have a buyer's agent back then?
No, so I purchased that one on my own. It was, May 2017. So I think it was like pretty much at the height of the market in Sydney. So I paid $538,000, and it's a block of 12 units. So at least the strata costs are pretty low, and, it's a 1970s build complex. So in those ways, it was not a bad purchase, but it's definitely lost some of its value since then. So in March 2020, one of the other apartments in the complex sold for $500,000. So I've probably, lost a little bit of money with this purchase, but I brought with a big deposit. So I had a 30% deposit when I purchased.
Wow, congrats. That's impressive.
So at least my loan is still much lower than what the value of the property is. So that's a saving grace, I guess. But,
And the fact that you're living there, you're sort of not having to, pay a mortgage and rent at the same time. So I guess that makes things easier as well.
Yeah, we still really enjoy living here. So, it wasn't brought as a investment property. It was purchased as somewhere to live. So I don't regret the purchase, but if I could go back in time, I probably would have thought about it a little bit more and researched a little bit more, because I wasn't listening to podcasts like this one, or I wasn't reading about property investment. I was just looking for a place to live. So,
And that's very brave of you, because I know just from personal experience as well, it is really hard to pull sort of the trigger and to make that decision to invest all this money, because signing a 30-year loan or, 20-year loan, it's not a sort of easy job, especially when it's your first one. It's quite intimidating, isn't it? So, well done for sort of making that decision to do so. And in the long run, obviously it's worked out well for you, because you do live there, as you said.
Yeah, and I didn't have too many friends that were purchasing on their own either, so I didn't really have a lot of guidance. My mum actually brought my mum and dad's first home. My mum actually paid cash for it. So
wow.
She didn't have really any experience with mortgages or, anything like that. So I was learning everything from scratch.
And I'm sure when we always talk about this as well, obviously borders have been closed for a while now, given sort of our international borders, given the COVID crisis around the world. But once they do open, the migrants will sort of start coming back into Australia. So, apartments will become in high demand probably again, as opposed to sort of what we've seen over the past year. So you never know, it could the price growth could sort of be there once that does happen.
Yeah, Harris Park has a big South Asian population living here. So I think when the borders do open, there'll be, hopefully that price growth then, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. And so tell me, next, you and your partner, you obviously got married and you decided to purchase what you've sort of called your future home. So that's a 4-bedroom house in the ACT in 2019. Tell me about that process and your plans for that property.
Yeah, it was actually before we got married. So we'd been together for a little while, and we both sort of talked about the future and where we saw ourselves living. And we thought, well, we both really like ACT. That's where he grew up. So we've got family there and would be well supported in the future. And by that stage, I'd started to listen to a few property podcasts and started to sort of gain a bit more knowledge on property. And so everything that I'd been listening to and reading about personal finance spoke about time in the market is better than trying to time the market. So we decided together that we'll buy it now, since we have the savings for the deposit, and we'll just let time do its thing. When we're ready to move, which we when we purchased, we thought maybe 5 years, then we've already got a property. So that's what we decided to do.
And tell me about that journey in terms of sort of a loan as well. I guess at the time, interest rates were pretty low in 2019, right? So that was probably a good time to buy. And it's a 4-bedroom house. Tell us a little bit about the property and just sort of securing that property, how that sort of went about.
Yeah, so it's in Waniasa in the Tuggeranong district in the ACT. So it's a 4-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 2-car space on a big 900 square metre block of land. And we purchased it for $650,000 with a 20% deposit, which, like, my husband Andrew had some savings, I had some savings. We also borrowed some equity from the Harris Park property. And yeah, we put together a 20% deposit. We went down for a few weekends in a row, and it didn't take us too long to find the property. And yeah, so
that was based on independent research as well?
Yes. And it gets a rent of $570 per week. We've had 2 different tenants. So it was vacant for about 1 week, but the vacancy rates in Canberra are really low. So we've never had trouble having renters in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically no time, 1 week, just enough to clean the place.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, so that's obviously, and Canberra, like you said, Canberra's just been sort of going mental, the property market there, and vacancy rates are basically non-existent. So I guess this whole sort of COVID situation has served you well in terms of that property. And you mentioned also that you drew some equity from your apartment. So I guess that wasn't a total bust. I mean, you could still, not only are you living there, but you still have that equity to draw from there, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I guess it had a few years of paying P&I. And like I said at the start, I paid a big deposit to start off with. So there was still some equity, usable equity in it. So that helped as well, yeah.
Yeah. And have you had to put any sort of work into the 4-bedroom house in Canberra? I know Phil on a recent podcast chatted about having to sort of remove his entire roof and re-roof the place. And, it's quite a big sort of pain having to do that. Have you had anything similar, or is it sort of a pretty solid build?
Pretty minor things. They found some termites in some wooden fencing along the perimeter of the building, which we just had to get sprayed and treated. But yeah, nothing major like roofs or anything like that, thankfully. Yeah.
Well, that's really good. And we're just going to take a very quick break, Anna. We'll be back in a second.
Whether you're a seasoned property investor or about to buy your first property, finding the right investment property to buy in 2021 isn't easy. Why do it alone when you could partner with award-winning buyer's agent Paul Glossop? Over the last 10 years, Paul has helped hundreds of clients build multi-property portfolios. Paul's secret is finding off-market bargains that get snapped up before the general public even gets a sniff. Interested? Head to purepropertyinvestment.com today to schedule a strategy call with Paul Glossop.
And we're back. Welcome to the Smart Property Investment Show. Today we have a nurse, Anna from Sydney, with us. So we were just chatting about her second investment property, which she bought together with her husband in Canberra. So eventually you said that you want to move there. So there's the 5-year plan. Is that sort of still in place, or are you sort of rethinking that given sort of the past year and the events?
Yeah, around 5 years. We'll just see what happens in the future. Yeah. But
play it by ear.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that property has seen some pretty amazing growth. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so the ACT market has just really gone up since we purchased in 2019. So we just had a recent bank valuation, and its current bank valuation was $790,000.
Oh, wow. So that's like 200 and something thousand? Is that?
Yeah, but we actually think that's pretty conservative because they were using comparables from January this year, and I actually think the market has moved further. So there was a house literally opposite our house on the same street that sold for $1 million on the weekend.
Oh my goodness. That is just, does that make you want to sell this place now? Just to pocket that $500,000?
Well, it's pretty reassuring that, we made a good decision. I mean, we weren't obviously expecting that. I thought it might grow a little bit in the last 2 years, but that's pretty crazy, I guess. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And tell me, so when I know, we speak to a lot of buyers agents, and I know that a lot of sort of data and research goes into pinpointing properties like that are going to see massive growth like yours has seen. What sort of process did you guys have in place? Did you just go for a house in an area that you wanted to live in, or did you sort of put some research into making it a good investment property, I guess?
Yeah, no, it was a bit of luck, I guess. So Andrew, my husband's parents, live in the area, so we wanted to be close to family. I wanted to live on a big block, and it's also on a hill, so we have really nice views of the Woolaston area. Yeah, the house just appealed to us. It's our future home, so there's going to be an emotional side to the purchase as well. And yeah, so it wasn't really an investment decision, but it's just turned out to be quite a good investment decision in the end, I guess. Yeah.
That's right. And tell me, would you sort of, if it keeps growing, which I guess growth is sort of predicted to keep happening for the rest of this year and then into next year, if you listen to some of the sort of big four banks, they're predicting quite big things for Canberra as well. Would you ever sort of consider putting it on the market and then maybe buying, 2 more homes somewhere else or something for that price? Or do you want that to sort of be your forever home?
Yeah, I think we see it as our forever home. I really love the property. We'll definitely utilise the usable equity in the property to buy investment purchases elsewhere. But no, it's our home. We won't sell it.
That sounds pretty exciting. I want to see a photo of this home. So just a couple of months ago, actually in April this year, you settled on a third property, a 3-bedroom house in Happy Valley, South Australia.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, tell me about that one. How did you, and I think you mentioned buyer's agent this time. So tell me how you sort of decided to go down that road.
So in the last few years, I've definitely increased the amount of self-education I've done around property investment. And, compared to equities, I like property. The leverage that you can get is really great. And we wanted to utilize that for sort of developing our future wealth, I guess, or creating future wealth for ourselves. So because this one was purely investment, we're never going to live in it. We wanted to take all of that emotion away and just focus on it being 100% for investment. So we did decide to use a buyer's agent. We had been sort of searching a little bit on our own, and I just thought that we were having a little bit of like analysis paralysis, I guess, and we just didn't have the confidence to pull the trigger. And so we needed the support of a buyer's agent to come in and sort of guide us and give us that reassurance and confidence to, make the purchase.
So tell us a little bit about that property, and whereabouts is Happy Valley?
It's in Adelaide.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's in the Onkaparinga region. I'm sure I've mispronounced that, but it's kind of in between the beach and the hills of Adelaide, like the wine sort of hills area of Adelaide. So I guess for that reason, it can only grow so much. Like there's only so many areas that new developments and things can go in. So that was one of the reasons we liked the area. But so the house is a 3-bedroom, 1 bathroom, 1 car. I think it was built in the 1970s. The building report was pretty much spotless. So, really good, solid brick and tile sort of house. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Amazing. And you've got, I imagine, a tenant living there at the moment, or?
Yeah. So there was already somebody in place when we purchased it. So they just continued on with their lease.
And tell me, how much did you purchase that for, and what's your sort of rental income?
Yeah, so it was $450,000 and the rent is $370 a week. That's probably slightly under rented just because they've been living there for such a long time, but they maintain the property really well, and it's been a breeze so far. So
yeah, exactly. And we've been sort of talking about that, whether it's worth, increasing the rent on a long-term tenant that has maintained the property well, that does love the property and will probably stay there for a while, or sort of risk losing that tenant if you do sort of increase the rent. Are you sort of having thoughts like that? Like, what's your thought process behind sort of that rental?
Yeah, well, everything you hear, and when people get sick of investment properties, it tends to be when they have tenants who don't look after their asset. And given that these guys seem to really love the house, like the gardens are beautiful, they've clearly put a lot of time and effort into making this house, their home, we would really not want to drive them out by being too greedy with the rent that we receive. So I think we will slowly increase it a little bit to try and bring it back up closer to the market value, but we definitely don't want to drive them out. No.
Yeah, exactly.
Be greedy and mean. So I don't want to do that.
Yeah. And I guess in the long run, when you think about it, if you might get better paying tenants, but if they're not looking after the property, you're going to have long-term costs where you're going to have to renovate possibly after they leave or fix up all sorts of things. So in the end, I guess it works out to have someone, and you said, they maintain the garden like it's their own. So they've made the property their own basically, which is great.
Yeah. And the aim of that property is for capital growth. So we can manage the cash flow. It's slightly positive at the moment. So, the purpose is not for great cash flow. The purpose is for capital growth. So
exactly. And what does your sort of buyer's agent say? What sort of capital growth is he or she predicting for the area?
Oh gosh, I can't even remember.
But it must be great.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Adelaide seems to always have really steady growth, but he thinks that it's really starting to show signs that it will take off. So we used Arjun Paliwal.
Oh, yeah. I know Arjun. Yeah. Very good friend of the SPI show. Yeah.
Yeah. And he'll look at inventory levels and
he loves his data.
All the data. Yeah. And so all the data is moving in the right direction and showing signs of growth. So yeah.
That's pretty amazing. And tell me a little bit sort of about that relationship with Arjun. I guess I imagine you didn't go down to Adelaide to see the property yourself. You sort of put your trust in him and his team.
Yeah, so his team took some videos of the property, which they obviously sent through, and we had a look, and it all looked really good. So we just stayed in Sydney. We didn't go to Adelaide, but yeah,
worked out really.
Yeah, of course we trusted him, but we also had to
do your own research.
Do our own research.
And I think most buyers agents do sort of want you to do your own due diligence just in case as well. So you're informed rather than just sort of handing the money over and saying, this is what I want to buy and you do all the hard work for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And he certainly encouraged us to ask as many questions as we could think of. So, yeah.
Oh, that's really good. So tell me, so that's obviously a very good experience for you. Do you sort of think you're going to proceed with Arjun and look for more properties? What's sort of the long-term plan for you?
Yeah, I think so at this stage. Probably until we build up a little bit more confidence, we might try and do it on our own in the future, but maybe for the next couple of properties, we would definitely seek guidance from a professional. And also it's just those relationships that he has with real estate agents in the local area that I think you can't develop as a single buyer because, he's purchasing so many properties for all of his clients. He'll definitely develop better relationships than what we can as people who are only buying, one property in the area.
Yeah, exactly. That is true. And it's really hard if you are buying interstate, and you sort of don't have eyes on the ground and all you're relying on basically is realestate.com or a domain for your sort of, to find this property. So it can be a pretty sort of tough task.
And each state has a different buying process as well. So that's another hurdle that the buyer's agent just made a breeze. Arjun just made a breeze, yeah.
Exactly. We're just going to take another very quick break, Anna, and we'll be back in a second.
Are low interest rates impacting on your investment returns? It's time to rethink. Rethink Investing creates wealth for clients through the strategic purchase of positively geared, high cash flow commercial property. Industrial properties, retail assets, or office spaces can be a smart investment option that produces significant and long-term return on investment. Rethink your investment options and look to commercial property. Learn more at rethinkinvesting.com.au. Rethink Investing, Australia's #1 commercial buyers agency.
And we're back. Welcome to another episode of the Smart Property Investment Show. We've got nurse Anna with us. So at the moment, she has 3 properties, one apartment near Parramatta in Sydney, a house in the ACT, and just a recent purchase in Happy Valley in South Australia. So all of your 2 properties, obviously not the one you're living in, they're rented. Did you sort of have any problems with your tenants during that COVID period? Did anyone sort of seek lower rents, or how was that sort of to navigate as obviously a landlord?
Yeah, so our renters in the ACT, unfortunately, one lost his job and the other was made sort of part-time, I think, so reduced hours. So what our property manager and us and them negotiated was a rent deferral. So they paid what they could afford for, I think, a 6-month period, and now they're just slowly paying us back over the next 6-month period. They're both now back in full-time employment. So yeah, so that was a little bit, it was fine. The property manager was amazing. She navigated the whole situation for us. So yeah, it wasn't too bad. We had cash buffers in place for that sort of emergency cash buffer, I guess. So we could cover
any sort of costs or
any costs or payments while they had their rent deferred. So.
That's really good. And I guess during that sort of period, it is tough because you do need to sort of see your tenants' point of view. But then for you as well, it puts the extra pressure on you that you're not having that money come in and, you still have to pay your loans and all your sort of costs and council costs and whatnot. But it's good that you sort of navigated that period and now you sort of know moving forward as well what sort of plans and contingencies you have to put in place, I guess.
We were really fortunate. I mean, I'm a nurse, so during a global pandemic, there was no chance of me losing my job. And my husband's an engineer, so we're both pretty, I guess during this pandemic, all I've heard is that I'm an essential worker.
Exactly, you are.
So we both had job security. I think I would have been a lot more nervous if one of us had have gone through, the stress of losing our work, but thankfully that didn't happen. So
that's very good. And so tell me sort of the reason behind your investments. Is your plan to sort of retire early, or is it, to strike a better work-life balance, or what's sort of, the reasoning behind everything that you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, well, both my parents were fortunate enough to retire early, and that looks like a pretty good lifestyle to me. So yeah, we would definitely like to retire early and travel and just enjoy time while we're able to. I think also in the future, I'd love to be able to work just part-time. I find nursing is quite emotionally draining, and I think that I would have better capacity for it if I just worked part-time rather than full-time in the future. So, yeah.
And how many sort of investments are you planning to, or is there a rough plan in place for how many more you want to buy and when you want to buy your next one? Or
yeah. So we're looking into borrowing the equity from our ACT property now to purchase another property, in the near future, hopefully. We don't have like a set number of properties or anything like that. We're sort of more aiming for a passive income of around sort of 150,000 a year. I think we could probably even work off less than that, but that's sort of where Andrew thinks we should probably sit. So, so we'll probably, as you said earlier, we're in the sort of acquisition phase at the moment, and we'll work up our property portfolio, but then in the future probably consolidate that back down and keep the ones that have really good cash flow and sell the ones that have been primarily purchased for the capital growth.
Exactly. And would you sort of recommend, having gone through this journey where you bought your own property to which you live in at the moment and then moved on to investments, would you recommend that to others to first sort of start off buying, their primary residence, or does that sort of not play a part in the game? What would you say?
Yeah, I don't have any regrets about my purchases, but in hindsight, I guess the Harris Park one might have held me back a little bit. Perhaps if I had have purchased a property that had better capital growth, then it would have set me up to expand the property portfolio a bit sooner. But you don't know what you don't know. So,
Exactly. And it's always easy to criticize ourselves for, decisions made in the past. But, you were a nurse, you're 29, you bought your first apartment. I think that there's a lot to be proud of there as well.
Yeah, it was definitely a massive achievement at the time. And I learned so much through that process that I didn't even know about like what principal and interest meant and what fixed and variable was. Like there was just so much for me to learn. So it was good in that aspect. Yeah. And I think you learn best by doing. So just getting into the market was probably,
exactly.
And I think you also learn more from the things that you don't quite get right the first time anyway. So
that's always the case, isn't it? You learn from your mistakes, I guess, as they say.
Yeah, and if I had have fluked, if Canberra would have been our first property purchase, there's a chance that I would have thought that it was all me when it wasn't. It was just, luck.
Yeah. And it does, you could have sort of been too sort of confident and gone into, some maybe bigger purchases, or you never know. Yeah.
I think the fact that my first purchase hasn't really turned out that well has meant that I'm not overconfident, or I'm not making risky decisions. I'm, much more considered with the purchases that we're making. So
that's really good. And so what's your sort of plan? Are you going to wait? Obviously, the market's sort of peaking at the moment, so it is quite expensive, and there aren't too many properties on the market at the moment because everyone's sort of rushing to buy. Not people just aren't selling, I guess. Are you going to wait this through and maybe see what happens next year, or do you want to sort of move quick and buy the next one? Or
yeah, well, we're definitely in a position where we can purchase again. I try not to crystal ball things too much, if that makes sense. I just don't know. Who knows? I think you can make calculated decisions based off data, but at the end of the day, sometimes things are a bit unpredictable. So I think if we're ready to go again, I think we should just go again.
Do it. Yeah. Don't wait.
Try not to let the FOMO sort of try not to pay too much because of FOMO. But I think if it's a purely investment decision, then there's less risk of that. I think when you're trying to purchase a home to live in, that's when FOMO can really get the better of you.
Because emotions as well play a big part, obviously.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Anna.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a real pleasure talking to you and hearing about your investment journey. And we definitely want to hear from more investors like yourself that have, gone about things themselves and started quite early and then, progressed in their investment journey. But yeah, thanks again, and get in touch when you buy your sort of next property. I definitely want to sort of follow your journey with you.
Will do. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to our listeners for tuning in today. If you'd like to write to me with any questions or suggestions, or if you'd like to join us on the Smart Property Investment Show, please write to me at editor@smartpropertyinvestment.com.au. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Well, thanks again for joining us, and I'll catch you next time.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs, and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.
Bluestone makes investment loans simple with competitive interest rates. Borrow up to 85% of the value of your investment property without paying lender's mortgage insurance, and no cap on existing investment portfolio size. Plus, personal Bluestone support from application to settlement. So don't wait to unlock your future. Bluestone, award-winning home loan solutions. Find out more at bluestone.com.au/investors. Lending criteria, T's and C's and fees apply. Credit provided by Permanent Custodians Limited, Australian Credit Licence 390183.